When I was a little kid, my dad tried to publicly embarrass me, but he did not know he was raising a bad bitch. So one day I came home and I was having a real bad day at school and I was crying, I was. And my dad looked at me, he's like, you better stop that crying, that's girly. And what did I do? I kept crying. He looked at me, he's like, yeah, get up, we're going to the store. I'm like, why are we going to the store right now? What? He said, since you wanna be girly by crying, we're gonna go get you a dress. And you're gonna walk around the store in that dress so everybody can see how girly you are. At first I was like, no, please, that's gonna be so embarrassing, Dad, no. We still went to the store. My dad hands me this black dress and says, go in the fitting room and change into it. I put it on, I look into the mirror, and I was like, damn, bitch, I look good. I walked out of that damn fitting room strutting my shit. My dad was like, you're not embarrassed? I was like, why the hell I'm about to be embarrassed looking like this?
Storytime about the time a nail salon took advantage of my blindness. Sister and I got our nails done. We used to go all the time, and while the lady was doing my nails, she asked me how I knew how much money I had. At the time, I used cash, never again after this, but I told her that I folded my bills a certain way. I told her that I folded my 20s different than my 10s, different than my 5s, different than my 1s. Anything of her asking that question, I think it's a good question, and I just thought she was curious. I got done with my nails, she walked me towards the front, and my sister was actually just finishing up with hers, so it was perfect. There's another man at the front, and he asked me how I knew how much money I had. I told him the same thing. Before I left to go to the nail salon, I made sure exactly how much money I had. My sister helped me count it, helped me make sure that I folded the right bills, just so I knew how much I had, how much I would spend. I gave her the money, positive that I gave her the right amount because it was just folded, it was folded perfectly, and I counted it out. She takes it, starts talking in a different language, and then tells me that I owe her $20 more. Or I didn't, and I told her the exact amount I gave her, and she's like, no, you didn't give me this amount, you gave me that amount. Like for part 2.
When Lindsay Lohan's dad was doing all those interviews back in 2013 outside of Lindsay's courtroom where she was having all her trials, and we all thought this dude was just trying to get his 15 minutes of fame. What if I told you the same people who trapped Britney Spears in this 13-year conservatorship were also after his daughter, and he was doing what he could at the time to keep his wife and Luann Taylor from entrapping Lindsay in the same way they trapped Britney? Granted, maybe he wasn't the best of dudes, but he was doing what he could. He was doing what he could to keep them from trapping his little girl. And in those interviews, you can hear him saying what we know now is what they did to Britney. He's saying exactly what she's saying is happening, is what they're trying to do to his daughter back then. And this wasn't the only celebrity that Luann Taylor tried to sink her teeth into. She also attempted to lock down Courtney Love and her daughter Frances by claiming they too weren't able to make their own decisions and needed a team of people running their lives, even attempting to go after the right to Kurt Cobain's image. Luckily, Lindsay was able to run out of the country, and so was Courtney Love, to avoid what we see now as money-hungry persecution. How is it possible in this day that money, the root of all evil, can make parents enslave their daughters just to get a piece of their money pie? And who is Luann Taylor, and why did she bring this idea to her parents? Luann Taylor is the owner of TriStar Management, and she had been trying to sink her teeth into Britney for a while. It failed with Lindsay because she ran off. It failed with Courtney because she ran off, and Courtney was doing her best to get the word out that this was happening. Here's an email where Britney's talking about, it's sideways, I'm sorry, just pause to read it, where Britney's talking about how she's being stalked by this crazy lady that won't leave her alone. Now, how is that this crazy lady ends up managing Britney's entire life? Doesn't that say something? And right around when the Free Britney movement started to take off and that it was getting out there, that it was getting traction, that what was happening to Britney was not okay, Luann Taylor stepped down. She was like, I'm out. But will she be held responsible? Will she face some sort of consequence for what she did to Britney and what she tried to do to Lindsay and to Courtney Love and Frances Bean? I think the people behind all of this, the little devil in Jamie Lynn Spears' ear, needs to be held accountable.
Story time about how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Yes, my boyfriend actually did marry my mom. A little backstory on him. He and I had been dating for 6 months. We decided we wanted to move in together, but neither of us had a job. So we ended up moving in with my mother. A little backstory on my mom. Her and I never got along when I was growing up. I mean, it would get to the point where we would throw hands. Every single week she had a new boyfriend. Most of the time her boyfriends would come live with us and she would pay for everything. She even asked me to get a job so that I could help support her and her boyfriend. I started working at a restaurant, and yeah, I helped her pay for bills. I would even buy her boyfriend his beer. When I got accepted into college, I decided I would move out. After that, I barely spoke to my mom. Fast forward to when my boyfriend and I move in with her. She would wear lingerie around the house and constantly flirt with my boyfriend. I had to tell her on several occasions to cover up and just leave him alone. But here's the thing, it never bothered my boyfriend. In fact, he would flirt back. I thought he was just joking. Until a few months passed and he breaks up with me. Part 2 is up.
Loved every minute of it. The control he had over someone as powerful as me, as he loved the control to hurt his own daughter. 1,000%. He loved it. I work 7 days a week, no days off, which in California, the only similar thing to this is called making anyone work against their will, taking all their possessions away, credit card, cash, phone, passport card, and placing them in a home where they work with the people who live with them.
Compares her conservatorship to being S-word trafficked, which we obviously can't say here. But not only that, she talks about being sent to this center where she has to pay out of pocket.
I'm sorry, Brittany, you have to listen to your doctors. They are planning to send you to a small home in Beverly Hills to do a small rehab program that we're going to make up for you.
And the only reason I bring that up is because that's another type of fraud. Sending someone to a certain center and then you make the money for being referred to that center. Funny enough, Lindsay Lohan's dad just recently got arrested for that as well. So who knows, maybe that was his plan all along.
Part 2 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, we moved into my mom's house and she was wearing lingerie all the time. And she would constantly flirt with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was having a really hard time finding a job, but luckily I found a job. So I started working as a personal assistant. The problem is that as a personal assistant, you have to be on call almost 24/7. So I was usually never home, and sometimes when I would get home, I'd have to go right back out. This allowed for my mom and my boyfriend to spend a lot of time together by themselves. I would come home and they would be watching movies on the couch together. My mom would always cook him dinner. And then I started finding out stuff. For example, I found out they went to the movies together and they didn't invite me. I only found out because my boyfriend used our joint bank account to pay for the tickets. Sometimes they would order food for themselves and not even offer me any. And they would have beach days. They were spending way too much time together. At first I thought this was good because it meant they got along. But the more my mom dressed provocatively, the more I realized she was trying to seduce him. Then my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out. Because him and my mom fell in love. Part 3 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So one day my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out. And when I asked him why, he said that him and my mother fell in love. But since I was already suspecting something, it didn't really surprise me. But of course I was still devastated. That's when he asked me if I could move out that same night. Mind you, I don't have any money or even a place to go to. That's when I run over to my mom's room and guess what? She had locked herself inside. The coward didn't even want to face her own daughter. She told me that the best thing for everyone was for me to move out and that she knew I could get back up on my feet. So I grabbed some of my stuff and I went over to my best friend's house. My best friend invited me to live with her, thank God. A few weeks later, my mom invites me to her wedding with my boyfriend. Or ex, I should say. Last I heard, she's doing OnlyFans, and my ex is living off of her. I have a better job, I'm thriving, and have my own apartment.
So last night, something a little scary happened. So I would call myself a relatively deep sleeper, and I don't really wake up in the middle of the night that much, or I haven't recently. And that was up until last night. So last night I went to bed around like 1 a.m. And when I say I passed out. So I'm sleeping and all of a sudden I wake up at around 3:53 a.m. And when I woke up, for some reason I was wide awake, not tired at all, not groggy, nothing. So I sit up out of my bed and I start looking around when I notice the living room lights right next to my room are on, even though I fall asleep with them off every night. And I have like this tapestry covering my room from the living room. And since the lights were on, I could see into the living room. And I saw somebody standing right here. Right here. So I jumped out of bed, swung the fucking curtain open, and nobody was there. I'm really hoping that was just a dream.
Story time about how I crashed my dad's really expensive car. So a little background information. My mom had just got remarried to my stepdad 3 years ago, and he was this rich asshole who owned a bunch of food trucks and thought he was the shit. Well, at the time I also had a boyfriend, and we had only been dating for like a month and a half. My boyfriend would always beg me to let him drive my stepdad's car, and I always said no because that was like his child. Like he had children. He could care less about them. His car was more important. Anyway, so the one weekend my parents are out of town, and one of my friends was throwing a graduation party. So that whole day my boyfriend was trying to talk me into taking the car, and I already knew where my stepdad hid the keys. So I just decided I wouldn't drink that night and I would just take the car. He kept asking me if he could drive, but clearly I said no, because this kid literally told me that he crashed the first 2 cars that he had. So we get to the party, we're having a good time, and one of my friends tells me that everybody's taking pictures with my car outside. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I crashed my dad's very expensive car. So like I said, everybody's taking pictures of the car, but I decided to let it go at first. I mean, there was one point where I went outside just so that way I could kind of let everybody know, hey, you're taking pictures with my car. Well, half an hour later, my boyfriend and I decided to leave, and he's obliterated. Like, we probably got 50 feet from her house, and then I had to stop the car so that way he could get out and throw up in somebody's yard. Anyway, so he gets in the car, we're on the way back to my house, and my house was like a 20-minute drive away. Well, we were 5 minutes from my house. At this one intersection, I get a green light and I go to make a right, and I accidentally hit a car turning out of the bar parking lot. So I'm literally freaking the fuck out. And my boyfriend's in the seat next to me crying for some reason. So the guy in the other car calls the cops. The cops show up, they call my stepdad and my mom. My boyfriend went to the hospital, he had alcohol poisoning. Well, my boyfriend told his mom that it was all my fault and I'm grounded for 6 months.
Part 2. So we got into this big argument and we ended up having to get our parents involved. After a while, things seemed to settle down a little bit. But then one day my parents pulled me aside and said we needed to get revenge. I had never heard anything like this from my parents before, so I was pretty shocked. My mom came up with this plan for me to stay friends with her so that I could gather all sorts of dirt on her. And then when she dropped me as a friend, then we would expose her. So everything went according to plan. I was friends with her for a couple months after that. Oh, and my best friend and her parents were also in on this. So then when she got super toxic and ended up dropping us, we exposed her big time. She ended up leaving the school, and everything went back to normal like she never even existed. The end.
Part 1 of how I stole my boyfriend's side chick. My boyfriend Zach and I decided to check out a new restaurant in town for date night. We got in his car and started to head out. He usually has better cell coverage than me, so we were using the navigation on his phone to get to the new spot. I noticed his buddy from work, Matt, was texting him as usual. However, this time I noticed the heart emojis out of the corner of my eye at the top of the screen from Matt, which I thought was weird. I started to think about it, and Matt would always text pretty late at night, and my boyfriend always seemed really happy when texting him. I played it off like I was going to look for a faster route, picked up his phone, and quickly copied down the number. When we got to the restaurant, I started paying attention and noticed Zach texting throughout our date. The next day, I called the number and a girl named Jessica answered. He saved her number under Matt and told me he was a buddy from work for months. We started talking and she told me that she had no idea that he had a girlfriend. She also told me that they met on Tinder and they've been talking for a while.
Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, no, what are you talking about? So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was like really fucking weird. Anyway, so the one night that Gia's over, yes, I still had her over after this because I didn't think it was really weird at the time. My sister had her boyfriend over and they were in the living room watching a movie, and the whole time Gia is begging me to go in the living room and watch the movie with them. So I'm like, fine, whatever, we'll do that. We go into the living room, we all sit on the couch, and my couch is kind of small, so like we all had to squish. So she sits her ass right next to my sister's boyfriend. Well, my sister's boyfriend got up and started freaking the fuck out. Well, turns out that Gia was trying to touch him under the blanket. So I told her to leave. Next day I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to be like my sister because she never had an older sister.
Story time about when a client came to get her nails done by me just because she thought I was messing with her boyfriend. So right off the jump, when this girl was booking her appointment, it was already like iffy. Like she was going back and forth. Like booking an appointment with me is simple. Inbox me about time, send your deposit.
Hope you guys liked this video and found it helpful. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. It does help support us and lets know what videos you guys want to see.